the federal government did something really good for the healthcare profession, but oddly, the act drew very little public attention. Despite growing concerns over the security of electronic patient records, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has announced that it is reducing penalties for violations of the HIPAA and HITECH Act by up to 98%. This is a big deal because previously the fines ranged up to $1.5 million for a single transgression. Under the new plan, they can still hit careless and unrepentant sinners for that much. But what's changed is fines for lesser offenders, which are now maxed out at $250,000. And for miscreants who had no idea they were doing something wrong, the maximum penalty has been reduced to a chump change limit of $25,000 per violation. Hearing this news, you might be thinking, I'm glad I'm a doctor and don't have to worry about such minutiae. To which I say, not so fast. There are nightmare stories galore about ordinary healthcare workers caught in the snare of privacy law enforcement for what some might deem minor offenses. For example, a former UCLA health system researcher went to jail for accessing and reading confidential medical records held by the University School of Medicine. After receiving notice he was about to be fired, the researcher spent 3 weeks accessing files 323 times of coworkers, as well as of California celebrities such as Drew Barrymore, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Hanks, and Leonardo DiCaprio. His curiosity got him 4 months in the pen, even though he reportedly did nothing more than read the records. In other words, he did time for just being nosy. Then there was the Walgreens pharmacist who was fined $1.44 million for sharing confidential medical information about a customer who had once dated her husband. Happily for her, Walgreens paid the penalty out of its pocket. In another case, a 26-year-old respiratory therapist faced up to a year in prison for improperly accessing hospital medical records of 596 patients over a 10-month period. The therapist had authorized access to patient records, but only to those patients she was treating. Fortunately for her, the judge gave her a mere 48 hours jail time and 2 years probation. And in Texas, a health system paid a $2.4 million penalty simply for naming a single patient in a press release defending itself against public accusations of discrimination. These examples underscore the risks of failing to grasp the gravity of safeguarding protected health information, or PHI. Adding to the risk is the explosion of digital records, thousands of which can be saved onto a $5 flash drive or in a spreadsheet attached to an email that might be forwarded God knows where and to whom. In my own experience, more than once have I known of healthcare provider groups emailing spreadsheets, each containing hundreds of patient records, by ordinary unencrypted email. The senders were unaware that emails are generally unencrypted and thus can be breached or hacked in any of the multiple servers and networks through which they pass. It's important to know that the new HIPAA directive only helps practices who take security seriously and make every effort to mitigate problems. Exercising good cybersecurity habits may seem a daunting task for smaller medical practices, often lacking the financial, IT, and personnel resources of larger health systems. If MD Anderson Cancer Center can't avoid a $4.3 million fine for the theft of one laptop computer and for 2 flash drives containing PHI, what can 1 and 2 and 3 doctor private practices do to protect themselves? Well, a pretty good amount, it turns out. A good first step for a smaller provider group is to organize a staff training session on the basics of PHI, HIPAA, and the HITECH Act. The training should include everyone. No amount of technology can save you from the mistakes of an untrained employee. For ideas on conducting sessions, start by Googling the term HIPAA training. You'll find a wealth of convenient low-cost and no-cost options online. One of the best is an outstanding 62-page guide available for download for free from the Federal Health Information Technology Office. The next step is developing a process for internal security management. Chapter 6 of the Health Information Technology Guide spells out a 7-step recipe for designing such a process, beginning with an analysis of current security measures. Almost every small to medium-sized organization can develop and implement a sound process with existing staff following these 7 steps. A third step would be to conduct such a thorough risk analysis to consider how your team interacts with PHI. A comprehensive audit may reveal surprising vulnerabilities in your system. The last couple of years have seen an alarming rise in ransomware and phishing schemes directed at hospitals and public facilities, including a widely publicized incident in last year in which a regional hospital in Indiana paid hackers $55,000 to regain access to every file on its computers and network. So while it's good news that some fines for privacy failures are now up to 98% lower, the sobering news is that new risks are growing at a frightening rate. The bad guys are getting smarter and more interested in hitting healthcare organizations, so much so that government fines may soon become the least of your worries.